Welcome to According to Sam, folks. This is episode 340. Thank you for joining me today. Got a really good podcast for you today. We're going to get into talking about Russiagate. That's what we've been talking about. Why are we talking about Russiagate? Well, we're talking about Russiagate because the current director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and the current FBI director have been releasing and declassifying information that is shedding some light on what happened during the Russia investigation, which led into the Mueller investigation. And yes, it was 10 years ago, but after Congress is back in session after the Labor Day weekend, I'm expecting this to be a big story. There's going to be investigations. There's going to be more disclosures and declassifications. And most Americans don't really understand this stuff. They don't understand it at all. We're going to get into it today. I think that and you think about this, and we're going to talk about the hacking of the DNC today. And most Democrats and even a lot of Republicans take it for granted that Russia did hack the DNC and release DNC emails to WikiLeaks, and WikiLeaks published them, and people just believe that that's true because it's been ingrained and drilled into the heads of the American people that that's the case. And the facts are that it's not necessarily true. We're going to talk about what's true, what we know in today's podcast. But 2 podcasts ago, we played the speech from Trump at his Durrell property. This was 2 days after the first WikiLeaks dump. The first WikiLeaks dump came on July 25th, the first day of the DNC that summer in Philadelphia. And it exposed how the DNC was rigging the primary against Bernie Sanders and for Hillary Clinton. The chairman of the DNC, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, had to drop down from being the chairman because she was exposed rigging the primary for Hillary Clinton and against Bernie Sanders. And in that Durrell speech, when people were accusing Trump of colluding with Russia and being in cahoots with Russia in doing this, he says, I don't know anything about Russia. And we don't even know if it's Russia. It could be China, could be anyone. We don't even know who it is. He says, but it doesn't matter who it is. What matters is what was in these emails and showing that the DNC was rigging the primary. That's the important thing that people should be focusing on. The chairman of the party has to drop down from being the chairman in the middle of the election because she's rigging the primary for one candidate over another. And if you think about it, the last 3 Democratic nominees for president, Hillary Clinton in 2016, Joe Biden in 2020, and then Kamala Harris in 2024. All of those candidates were pushed forward onto the party, and it wasn't necessarily who the party wanted. In 2016, if it was a fair election and you didn't have the super delegates and you didn't have the DNC rigging it, who knows if Bernie Sanders could have won the nomination. Same thing in 2020. Bernie Sanders won the first 2 primaries, and Joe Biden loses the first 2 primaries. And then Barack Obama gets on the phone with all the candidates and tells them to drop out before South Carolina so they can rig it for Joe Biden, and he becomes the nominee. Same thing in 2024. Nobody voted for Kamala Harris to be the nominee, and they just pushed Kamala Harris. I mean, all the party elite just pushed Kamala Harris forward to be the nominee, and she loses. So that's a major part of the problems that the Democrats are having, is not only that they're playing in people's faces, like the woman said, and we looked at in the last podcast, and the stunts and the schemes that they continue to play, but they won't let the voters pick who the voters want. And we've seen that in the past 3 elections. Hillary Clinton rigging it for her, putting Obama getting involved and pushing Biden forward, a candidate that wouldn't have won without the mail-in ballots and COVID and all that. There's no way he would have won, but then just becomes a terrible president and struggling in the polls. And then they when he drops out, they don't have an open primary. They just push Kamala Harris forward, a terrible candidate. So these are just more problems that the Democrats are having. And in 2016, it doesn't matter where these emails came from that WikiLeaks released. If it came from Russia, China, whoever, we're going to talk about where they came from today. It was what was in those emails and what those emails exposed about how the DNC was rigging the primary for Hillary Clinton against Bernie Sanders that was so important. All right, so let's get into it today. And we're going to start with the clip from Chris Cuomo from CNN. And this is back when he was working for CNN back in 2018. I want you to take a listen to what he says.
The Russians hacked the election. You know it. I know it. This new indictment of a dozen Russian high-ranking officers makes it clear. So
the new indictment of the Russian high-ranking officers. What is he talking about? So everything that he's talking about comes from the Mueller report. And the Mueller report, the Mueller investigation was part of the cover-up of Russiagate. That was the entire reason that a special counsel was appointed. That's the entire reason that the special counsel investigation lasted 2 years. And what you need to understand about this, Mueller does indict these Russian officers, but these Russian officers, they weren't convicted. I mean, you just have indictments. I mean, they didn't even go to trial and cross-examine the evidence that Mueller puts into his indictment. And an indictment is just that. It's just an indictment by a prosecutor. Mueller is a prosecutor. If every indictment was true, then nobody would even need a defense. Nobody would need to cross-examine the information. So what I'm basically telling you is it doesn't matter what Mueller puts in his indictment. Mueller can put whatever he wants into his indictment. None of these Russians were ever convicted. None of these Russians ever got to cross-examine the evidence that Mueller presented in his indictment on them. So it doesn't matter that Mueller indicted these Russians. And going back to the podcast and what Abby Phillips was saying in the last podcast about was Trump prosecuted? Or listen to that again.
It happened. The Russia hoax. First of all, was Donald Trump prosecuted?
They did it to impeach
was he prosecuted?
So she says it like Donald Trump. Was Donald Trump prosecuted? No, Donald Trump wasn't prosecuted. And that's the thing is that you guys told us over and over again that Trump was guilty. You spent 2 years telling us that he was guilty. And the fact that, like I said in the last podcast, the fact that he wasn't prosecuted, that's a big problem for you. That doesn't make it better. That makes it worse because Mueller, if you're telling me that Trump is guilty, then Mueller should have indicted Trump, and he didn't prosecute him. But he indicts these Russians, and these Russians never are extradited to the United States. They never go to trial. They never are able to cross-examine the evidence that Mueller presented on against them. And if Trump would have been indicted and prosecuted, that's something that Trump would have been able to do. All the stuff that's in the Mueller report, which we're going to talk about today, all that stuff could have been cross-examined. Trump's defense would have been able to look and say, this isn't evidence. This isn't proof anything, So that's what Chris Cuomo is talking about here. He's talking about the Mueller report and the Mueller indictments, which mean nothing.
you know it. I know it. This new indictment of a dozen Russian high-ranking officers makes it clear. So, will the president finally own the truth on the eve of being face-to-face with the man who ordered it all, Vladimir Putin? The United States was hacked by Russia during the election. Will you accept that as fact?
No, I'm sorry.
No.
I think it is still unproven. There's an enormous amount of forensic evidence that points to a conclusion based on the download times that there was no hack and that the material, the alleged hacked material, was downloaded to some kind of a portable drive.
Look at Fredo's face. Like, what are you talking about? What Roger Stone is saying here is absolutely true. That the forensic evidence that we do have shows that the download speed, it's not consistent with Russia hacking into the DNC from Eastern Europe and downloading these emails to a server in Eastern Europe. What the download speeds show is that, here, we'll let Roger Stones say it.
I don't know. That's why I'd like to see a trial. The Nation magazine, in an extensive article based on the findings of Bill Binney and Ray McGovern.
These guys have had subpoena power and the complete tools of the United States government. They've been looking at it for months.
He's talking about the Mueller investigation. These guys had subpoena power and all the tools. They've been looking at it for months. They looked at it for 2 years, Chris Cuomo.
And Ray McGovern.
These guys have had subpoena power and the complete tools of the United States government. They've been looking at it for months. They detail who did it, how they did it, how they conspired, the different types of malware they developed.
Yeah, they don't show any evidence, though, Cuomo. They don't show any evidence at all. They got tons of details and stories in the report. There's no evidence.
States government, they've been looking at it for months. They detail who did it, how they did it, how they conspired, the different types of malware they developed, the different ways they paid with cryptocurrency, fake servers to funnel the information, how they approached WikiLeaks, who they call Organization One, not exactly sure why, and they refer to you and how you were approached, how they developed DC Leaks, how they developed Guccifer. They lay
how they developed DC Leaks and how they developed Guccifer. So he says Guccifer, but he means Guccifer 2.0 because Guccifer is a real hacker who we know who this Romanian hacker who was extradited to the United States. He's in jail right now. Guccifer hacked Sidney Blumenthal. He most likely got into Hillary Clinton's server. He hacked a bunch of other Democrats. Guccifer. But this Guccifer 2.0 personality or whoever that was, this was someone who was created and DC Leaks. And this is what is in the Mueller report. But there's no evidence about who DC Leaks are. You tell us that Russia and the GRU created Guccifer 2.0 and DC Leaks, but there's no evidence of that at all, Chris Cuomo. This is just in the Mueller report, documented in the Mueller report. But just because Mueller says it doesn't mean it's true. There's no evidence.
The different types of malware they developed, the different ways they paid with cryptocurrency, fake servers to funnel the information, how they approached WikiLeaks, who they call Organization One, not exactly sure why, and they refer to you and how you were approached, how they developed DC Leaks, how they developed Guccifer. They lay it all out. Why fight the conclusion? Because you're in a very small group now. It's really you and the president.
Well, actually, I don't believe that because
I'm saying in the relevant corpus of people. I'm making you relevant here, Roger. I know my Twitter feed is awash with people who want to believe every word you are saying. But I'm saying of those who should know better, very few.
All right. So Chris Cuomo's making the case that we know that it's Russia because Mueller said that it's Russia, and Mueller does say that it's Russia, but he doesn't provide any evidence. Roger Stone, when he says, where are you getting this from? He makes reference to this article in the Nation magazine. And the article is written by Patrick Lawrence in the Nation. You can see the date, August 9th, 2017. And the headline, a new report raises big questions about last year's DNC hack. Former NSA experts say it wasn't a hack at all, but a leak, an inside job by someone with access to the DNC's system is what this report says. And that's what Roger Stone is making reference to, that it was someone who worked within the DNC who downloaded these files onto a thumb drive and leaked this stuff to WikiLeaks, that it wasn't a hack at all. There was also another article that, again, written by Patrick Lawrence here again, same author, and this one was in Salon. This article was written a year earlier in July of 2016, and we'll read the headline again. Shades of the Cold War, how the DNC fabricated a Russian hacker conspiracy to deflect blame from its email scandal. And one of the major contributors on both of those articles, like Roger Stone stated, is Ray McGovern. Who is Ray McGovern? We'll read a little bit of his WikiLeaks page. Ray McGovern is an American political activist and former Central Intelligence Agency officer. So he's a former CIA officer. McGovern was a CIA analyst from 1963 to 1990, and in the 1980s chaired the National Intelligence Estimates and participated in the Presidential's Daily Brief. He received the Intelligence Commendation Medal at his retirement, returning in 2006 to protest the CIA's involvement in torture. And interesting thing about McGovern here, I just want to show you that he went to Fordham University. I just can't get over all of these spooks and spies going to these Jesuit schools, but he went to Fordham University as well, just like John Brennan, just like William Casey. I mean, it's crazy how many of these guys go to these Jesuit schools, these spooks. But McGovern also worked for RT for a while. So this is how they discredit him, because he worked for RT and Sputnik News. But he basically is the one who looked at this and said that, look, this couldn't have been Russia hacking this stuff from Eastern Europe, that this was most likely because of the download speeds and other things that we can see, that this was someone within the DNC who downloaded this stuff and leaked it to WikiLeaks. And who is the person that we think downloaded this stuff? We're going to get to it in just a moment. But WikiLeaks, Julian Assange himself, he denied that any of this stuff came from Russia, and Russia denied hacking. And so, you can say, well, of course they're going to deny it, but it's up to you. If you're accusing Russia, if you're accusing WikiLeaks, it's up to you to present the evidence, the hardcore evidence that shows that Russia did this and that WikiLeaks got these emails from Russia.
You did not get this information about the DNC, John Podesta's emails. Can you tell the American people 1,000% you did not get it from Russia or anybody associated with Russia?
We can say, we have said repeatedly over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government.
Our source is not the Russian government. So he's alluding to the fact that he only has one source that gave us these emails, and it wasn't Russia. It didn't have anything to do with Russia.
We can say, we have said repeatedly over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government and it is not a state party.
It's not the Russian government and it's not a state party, is what Julian Assange says. And he knows who his source is. This is another interview that Julian Assange did with I think it was a British outlet. But take a listen to what he says here.
Donald Trump has had a disastrous few weeks. If you look at the polls, he needs a miracle.
This is in 2016, before the election. And this a British reporter is saying Donald Trump needs a miracle to win. What are you talking about? He needs a miracle to win, guy. Just go back and look at all the electoral losses that Democrats have had over the past 6 years. He didn't need a miracle to win. It's more than likely that he's going to win if you look at all the electoral losses that Democrats have had over the last 6 years.
A miracle. In the American political lexicon, there's such a thing as the October surprise. The stuff that you're sitting on, is an October surprise in there? Do you even know what you're sitting on?
WikiLeaks never sits on material. Our whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often very significant risks. As a 27-year-old works for the DNC, who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks.
So he says that whistleblowers go through they take a lot of risk to leak stuff to us. He says there's a 27-year-old who worked for the DNC that was shot in the back. He just, alludes to this 27-year-old who was shot in the back who worked for the DNC.
WikiLeaks never sits on material. Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often very significant risks. There's a 27-year-old works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
that was just a robbery, I believe.
No, it wasn't a robbery. No, it wasn't a robbery. They didn't take anything. They didn't take his wallet. They didn't take his watch. No, it wasn't a robbery at all. But that's what it was sold to us, is that it was just a robbery. This 27-year-old young man who worked for the DNC who was murdered in July of 2016.
WikiLeaks never sits on material. Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often very significant risks. There's a 27-year-old works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
that was just a robbery, I believe, wasn't it?
No, there's no finding. So
what are you suggesting? What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that our sources take risks, and they become concerned to see things occurring like that.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
we don't comment on who our sources are.
But why make the suggestion about a young guy being shot in the streets of Washington?
Because we have to understand how high the stakes are in the United States.
Yeah, so he doesn't. Julian Assange, we don't comment on our sources, but he alludes to the fact that this 27-year-old young man who was shot in the back twice, double tap, it's always a double tap, that he was the source. And that individual is this guy, Seth Rich, 27-year-old young man who worked for the DNC, and Seth Rich was murdered in July of 2016, shot in the back with the double tap. They didn't take anything from him. Now, we all know how dangerous Washington, D.C. is, and particularly how dangerous it was back in 2016. So, I mean, with the dangerous city like Washington, D.C., it's easy to say that he was just mugged and murdered like many people in D.C., but they didn't take anything from him. They didn't take his watch. They didn't take his wallet. And he's just, murdered in cold blood. Seth Rich. Seth Rich is who Julian Assange is alluding to. And it is consistent with the download speed and what experts like Ray McGovern say that, look, somebody from within the DNC downloaded these emails, downloaded these documents onto a thumb drive or onto a disk, and they're the ones who transmitted this stuff to WikiLeaks. It wasn't a hack by Russia. That this guy did it, Seth Rich, and then he was murdered. He was murdered. The murder of Seth Rich. The murder of Seth Rich occurred on July 10, 2016 at 4:20 a.m. I mean, what are you doing out in D.C. at 4:20 a.m.? 4:20 a.m. in the Bloomingdale neighborhood of Washington, D.C. Rich died about an hour and a half after being shot twice in the back. Double tap. It's always a double tap. The perpetrators were never apprehended. Police suspected he had been the victim of an attempted robbery. What do you mean attempted robbery? They shot him. If they wanted to rob him, why didn't they take his wallet? Why didn't they take his watch? Why didn't they take any of his phone or anything else that was of value? It was attempted robbery. I mean, they shot him in the back twice. Why was it an attempted robbery? Why didn't they rob him? They didn't rob him because that wasn't what it was. It was a murder is what it was. 27-year-old Seth Rich was an employee of the Democratic National Committee, DNC. His murder spawned several right-wing conspiracy theories, including the false claim contradicted by law enforcement branches that investigated the murder that Seth Rich had been involved in the DNC leaked emails. The local police there in their investigation, which was a bogus investigation, says, no, he didn't have anything to do with the leaks. How do you know that? And then now I love this part in the Wikipedia page. It was also contradicted by the July 2018 indictments of 12 Russian military intelligence agents for hacking the email. So in this WikiLeaks page, same thing that Chris Cuomo is saying here is that Mueller's indictments of these 12 Russians, just the fact that he's indicted them, they haven't been convicted, they haven't cross-examined any of the evidence that Mueller presented on him, and there was no evidence. But just the fact that Mueller indicted these 12, that proves that they're guilty and that Seth Rich didn't have anything to do with the leaks, which is absolutely crazy, is what it says here in this WikiLeaks page. So Donna Brazile, we talked about Donna Brazile in the last podcast, that she was the vice chair of the DNC, and when Debbie Wasserman Schultz has to step down because she's exposed rigging the primary for Hillary Clinton and against Bernie Sanders, then Donna Brazile becomes the chairman in July, and she starts to run the Democratic National Committee. And in the Trump administration, later in the Trump administration, Donna Brazile writes this book called Hacks, the inside story of the break-ins and breakdowns that put Trump in the White House. And she calls it Hacks. And this alludes to the fact that Russia hacked the DNC, and she was working in the DNC when Russia hacked the DNC. But she puts this I guess it's a what do you call it? It's not a forward. It's it's basically that's saying that she's dedicating the book to in loving memory of my father, Lionel Brazile Sr., my beloved sister, Sheila Brazile, my fearless uncles, Nat, Floyd, and Douglas, Harlem's finest, my aunt Lucille, my friend and mentor, David Kaufman, my DNC colleague and patriot, Seth Rich. So this is the dedication in her book, that she's dedicating her book to Seth Rich and my beloved, Pomeranian Chip. So these are all the people who have died and that she misses, and she dedicates her book Hack to Seth Rich. I just think that's very, very interesting that she puts a dedication in her book Hacks to Seth Rich, who was double tapped in the back in DC. And I want you to listen to this report.
Donna Brazile offers up new insights into the controversial murder of Seth Rich. One America's Pearson Sharp takes a closer look at her claims and why they are not adding up.
The name Seth Rich continues to haunt the DNC, despite Democrats' best efforts to downplay the young staffer's death as nothing more than a botched robbery. But now, an unlikely source is coming forward with new claims about how Rich was killed. Donna Brazile has emerged from the shadow of her brief career as DNC chairwoman in 2016 with a new book and claims that point to something much more sinister behind Seth Rich's death. Brazile's book is titled Hacks, the inside story of the break-ins and breakdowns that put Donald Trump in the White House. In it, she takes aim at the Democratic establishment, leveling accusations of racism and sexism, and even claiming that she was treated like a slave by her colleagues. But she also touches on the murder of Seth Rich, even going as far as dedicating the book to him, along with several others. Rich was officially working on voter registration systems for the DNC back in the summer of 2016. But according to onlinehackerkim.com, Seth was also developing other technologies to expose corruption and the influence of corporate money in politics, and was behind the DNC's leaked emails to WikiLeaks. In the early hours of July 10, 2016, Rich was gunned down by unknown attackers just blocks from his house. Conflicting clues have grown since his death, with an official investigation turning up nothing on his killers or any plausible reason for his murder.
So they never found the killers. They don't know a motive for his killing. The killers don't take anything off of him or anything. He works for the DNC. He sees this corruption that the DNC is rigging the primary for Hillary Clinton and against Bernie Sanders. He's a perfect type of person to blow the whistle and to be a leaker to WikiLeaks. This makes far more sense than the Russians, that Seth Rich downloaded these emails and downloaded these documents and transmitted them to WikiLeaks. Now, we know that the only people to ever do a forensic investigation of the servers of the DNC was the company that they hired, CrowdStrike. And CrowdStrike shared their findings with the FBI, and the FBI just took their word for it because, as Comey says, that, you know, they're a reputable firm or whatever he says here. Take a listen.
Were you given access to do the forensics on those servers?
We were not. We were a highly respected private company, eventually got access and shared with us what they saw there.
The highly respected private company that the DNC and Hillary Clinton hired is CrowdStrike, highly respected. Again, I don't know why he has to tell us that they're highly respected. Who cares? They're being paid by the DNC. They're being paid by Hillary Clinton. What are they going to say? I don't care how highly respected they are. And honestly, why didn't the FBI, why didn't the DNC give the FBI access to their servers to do their own forensic? You should be asking that question. Why? What was it that the DNC didn't want the FBI to see in a independent forensic investigation of those servers? And why the DNC didn't give the FBI access to those servers and only gave access to CrowdStrike? And why is the FBI taking the word of this private firm that's being paid by Hillary Clinton and the DNC? Makes no sense.
To do the forensics on those servers.
We were not. We were a highly respected private company, eventually got access and shared with us what they saw there.
But is that typically the way the FBI would prefer to do the forensics, or would your forensics unit rather feel the servers and do the forensics themselves?
We'd always prefer to have access hands-on ourselves, if that's possible.
Of course you would, if that's possible. Well, why wasn't it possible? Why wasn't it possible that the FBI could do their own forensic investigation of the DNC servers? Because the DNC didn't want the FBI to do an independent forensic investigation of the DNC servers. They wanted the company that they hired, CrowdStrike, to do the investigation. And the FBI took the company that the DNC hired, took their word for it. They took their word for it. And I was explaining to you in the last podcast, and I've been explaining to you, that's what the impeachment was about. After Donald Trump had to suffer in his first 2 years of his first administration, suffer through a special counsel investigation, nightly reporting, nightly. Think about Rachel Maddow's reporting. Think about the reporting on CNN night after night that Trump is a Russian asset, new leaked information that show that Trump colluded with Russia to steal the election from Hillary Clinton, when Hillary Clinton was actually the one rigging the election. This is the funny thing about these Democrats. They're all like, democracy. We're fighting for democracy. We're fighting for democracy. They won't let their voters choose who their nominee is. They're rigging primaries so they can pick who they want to be the nominee. And it's all about democracy. So after Donald Trump suffers through the 2-year-long special counsel investigation, Mueller comes out and says there's nothing to see here after the 2018 election, and they've used this Russiagate narrative to win back seats in Congress. They come out and say there's no collusion. We have no evidence of collusion. So then Trump starts saying, okay, this narrative and this thing has been harming and hurting me politically for 2 years. I've had to suffer through this. Now that it's over, the investigation is over. Now I want to get to the bottom of where this story came from. Who tried to frame me in colluding with Russia and say that I was a Russian asset. So then Trump starts to do his own investigation and start looking into where this came from. And this is the conversation that he's having with Zelensky and why they impeached him. This is what Donald Trump is talking about when he asked Zelensky that I want you to do me a favor. I'd like you to do me a favor because our country has been through a lot. What's a lot? The Mueller investigation. I'd like you to do me a favor, though, because our country has been through a lot and Ukraine knows a lot about it. I would like you to find out what happened in this whole situation with Ukraine. They say CrowdStrike. They say CrowdStrike. They say CrowdStrike is what Trump says to Zelensky. This is why they impeached him. This is why they impeached him, because Trump was trying to get his hands on these servers that the FBI never got their hands on and weren't able to do a forensic investigation of, and to see if Russia actually did hack into these servers. They say CrowdStrike. I guess you have one of your wealthy people. The server. The server is what Trump is looking for. The server, CrowdStrike. This is the conversation that Trump is having with Zelensky when they decided to impeach him. And the impeachment, like I've been telling you, was furthering the cover-up. Trump wasn't asking Zelensky to dig up dirt on Joe Biden or Hunter Biden. Trump was trying to do an investigation into CrowdStrike and the server and find out where this lie came from in framing him to being a Russian asset. I guess you have one of your wealthy people, the server. They say Ukraine has it. Why would Trump think that Ukraine has the server? Because CrowdStrike, one of the founding members of founders of CrowdStrike, Dmitry Alperovitch, is a Russian-born American citizen now, I guess. And they've done a lot of work in Ukraine. They've done a lot of work in Ukraine where they were saying that Russia was hacking into Ukraine's systems. So for some reason, someone had told Trump that Ukraine had the servers and the servers were transported over to Ukraine. So this is the conversation that Trump is having with Zelensky when they decided to impeach him. He's talking about CrowdStrike. All right, we listen to this interview with Dmitry on CNN from 2016. Just listen to a little bit of this again.
We investigated back in May of this year. We believed and we came out with the evidence that the Russian government was responsible. What we
came out with the evidence. There was no evidence.
Believed and we came out with the evidence that the Russian government was responsible. What we now have come out with is evidence that it's actually directly tied to the Russian military, because the evidence that we uncovered is that in Ukraine,
there's no evidence.
The Ukrainian artillery forces were using this mobile app on their Android phones to help with targeting of their howitzer artillery missiles. And that
what you have to understand is that these guys, CrowdStrike, had been doing work in Ukraine, and there was hacking that was going on in Ukraine, and they were blaming Russia. Maybe it was Russia, but he puts two and two together, and watch what he says. This is his evidence. He's like, well, the Fancy Bear, we found out that Fancy Bear hacked these systems in Ukraine, and we started to ask the question that, who would have the motivation to hack into the DNC? Even if we don't even know if it was a hack into the DNC. There's no evidence that there was a hack, but he puts it together that who would have also the motivation to hack into these Ukrainian systems, but also the DNC. And then, it has to be the Russians.
Phones to help with targeting of their howitzer artillery missiles. And that app was hacked by the same group that we call Fancy Bear that broke into the DNC. They hacked the Ukrainians and were using that to track the location of those people and potentially use that to target them as well. And when you ask the question of, well, who would be interested in targeting Ukrainian artilleryman and hack into the DNC, Russian military becomes the obvious.
It becomes so Rush. Listen to what he's saying, that if you ask the question, who would hack into these Ukrainian systems and the DNC, the obvious question is the Russians. This is absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
As well. And when you ask the question of, well, who would be interested in targeting Ukrainian artilleryman and hack into the DNC, Russian military becomes the obvious target.
So when you hear Donald Trump cast doubt on where this is coming from, he says maybe it's Russia, maybe it's China, maybe it's someone in their home. And then you also look at the numbers that roughly half of Americans aren't sure or don't believe that Russia's behind this. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it highlights that more evidence needs to come out, and this is one of the reasons we put out this report that establishes, we believe with high confidence, that it...
We believe with high confidence. That's not evidence. That's not evidence. We believe with high confidence.
Sure, or don't believe that Russia's behind this. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it highlights that more evidence needs to come out, and this is one of the reasons we put out this report that establishes, we believe with high confidence, that it is indeed Russian military, and specifically the Russian intelligence agency of the Russian military called the GRU that's behind these hacks. And, we also encourage the U.S. government to come out with their evidence. I think it's a good idea for the President Obama.
We also encourage the American government to come out with their evidence. We're going to look at what the American government's evidence was here in a moment.
And, we also encourage the U.S. government to come out with their evidence. I think it's a good idea for the President Obama to commission that report to do a full review of the election hacks, and hopefully it will be made public soon.
Is this your purview to know, when you're talking about the Russian military, who would have ordered the Russian military to do this? Is there a way to tie this up to the upper branches of the Russian government?
Well, we can't tell you just from looking at the forensic evidence who made the order. We believe with high degree of confidence that the Russian intelligence agency was responsible. Whether it was Vladimir Putin that ordered it or someone else, we can't tell you that.
All right, so this guy's company was hired by the DNC to do the forensic investigation. They don't let the FBI do any forensic investigation. And he says exactly what the DNC wants him to say. I mean, why wouldn't he? He's hired by them. But even if they did a real forensic investigation, CrowdStrike, who was hired by the DNC, which I doubt, but even if they did do a real forensic investigation and they found malware that pointed towards Russia, that doesn't mean that it's Russia. And that's why I've been telling you guys about the Vault 7 leak. The Vault 7 leak, just like the DNC, what I suspect happened with the DNC emails, someone from within the CIA downloaded these files, these Vault 7 files, and released them to WikiLeaks. Now, in this instance, we know who released the Vault 7 emails. It was this guy, Joshua. And Joshua is a former CIA intelligence agency employee who was convicted for leaking classified documents to WikiLeaks. So just like I believe Seth Rich was the leaker who leaked to WikiLeaks, this guy was the leaker who downloaded files from the CIA and released them to WikiLeaks, the Vault 7 files. And the Vault 7 files that were released by WikiLeaks around the same time as Donald Trump is finding out that there was an investigation into him and they were spying on his campaign and everything leading up to the election. Around that same time is when WikiLeaks released all the Vault 7 documents. And what we learned in Vault 7 is, we'll listen to this report from the Wall Street Journal about what we learned from the Vault 7 dump. Take a listen.
The series of files, dubbed Vault 7, consists of 8,761 documents and files allegedly from the CIA's Center for Cyber Intelligence. Though many of the tools detailed in the documents are the kind of things you'd expect from an intelligence agency, they provide an unprecedented blueprint for how the CIA could hack individuals they're spying on. Here's how they could work. Say CIA operatives are investigating a suspect in France we'll call John. According to the leaks, CIA hackers operate out of the U.S. consulate in Frankfurt, Germany, using it as a base to cover Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. From the confines of the consulate, the CIA can track John's activities around France. The CIA purportedly has a few techniques it can use to hack into versions of Apple's iOS, the mobile operating system used in iPhones.
Now, understand that if it wasn't for this leak, the Vault 7 leak, we wouldn't know anything about these tools that the CIA has and that they're currently using to spy on all of us.
The WikiLeaks documents detail malware, allegedly used as a hacking tool, that appears to remain on an iPhone even after it has been rebooted, a technique known as persistence. To gain access to phones and other devices, the CIA would exploit zero-day bugs, previously unknown flaws in the operating system's code, that they would collect and store. If the CIA hacks John's phone, it can bypass the encryption of messenger apps like WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, and Confide that John uses, and collect voice, audio, and messages before the applications encrypt John's text. To track his movements, the agency can activate the camera and microphone on John's phone without him knowing, and retrieve his geolocation. Even if his cell phone's powered off, the documents describe how the CIA can hack other internet-connected devices to monitor John's activity. Working with British intelligence, the CIA developed an attack that can place Samsung smart TVs in a fake off mode. So while the TV appears turned off, in reality, it's functioning as a bug and recording his conversations in the living room. The CIA also apparently has the capability to target John's wireless internet router to connect to his infected computer or access files. American CIA hackers can also allegedly leave false breadcrumbs to mask the operation's fingerprints and make it appear that it was carried out by another country. That can be done by inserting malware components from a known Chinese, Russian, or Iranian hacking operation.
Now that's an important part right there that they say that we learned from these Vault 7 leaks, that the CIA has malware tools where they can leave breadcrumbs. They can hack into a system, leave breadcrumbs and malware to make it look like it was another country. Listen to this again that we learned from Vault 7.
The capability to target John's wireless internet router to connect to his infected computer or access files. American CIA hackers can also allegedly leave false breadcrumbs to mask the operation's fingerprints and make it...
False breadcrumbs to mask the hacker's fingerprints, that the CIA can leave false breadcrumbs. So and that's another reason that it was very important for the FBI to do their own forensic investigation. James Comey and the FBI should have gotten their hands on the servers. They should have done their own forensic investigation instead of leaving it to CrowdStrike, because Dimitri here says that we saw evidence that it was Russia, but doesn't mean anything. Because our CIA has tools where they can leave malware and fingerprints to make it look like it was Russia. How do we know that it was Russia just because you saw this malware? Or could it have been the CIA leaving these fingerprints for you so you would come to the high confidence determination that it was Russia? And it was actually John Brennan's CIA doing this and leaving the breadcrumbs so you would come to the high confidence conclusion that it was Russia. That's why it was very important for the CIA to do their own, the FBI to do their own forensic investigation, which they didn't. And that's why Trump, in the phone call with Zelensky after the Mueller investigation, that's why he's talking about CrowdStrike. That's why he wants to get his hands on the servers, because he wants to do a real forensic investigation, which wasn't done. Let's see if this was John Brennan and the CIA or if this was actually Russia, because the CIA has tools where they can leave breadcrumbs to make it look like Russia.
Internet router to connect to his infected computer or access files. American CIA hackers can also allegedly leave false breadcrumbs to mask the operation's fingerprints and make it appear that it was carried out by another country. That can be done by inserting malware components from a known Chinese, Russian, or Iranian hacking operation, for example.
Yep. So they can leave breadcrumbs to make it look like it's China, Russia, India, Israel, whoever they want. Our CIA has that technology, and we learned from the Vault 7 leak. All right, so we're going to listen to Aaron Mate here in this interview that he's doing with Megyn Kelly, and they get into the hacking.
We learned from Tulsi's declassification something really important, which is that the intelligence on the email hacking, forget the vote hacking, that was suppressed. And the two premier U.S. intelligence agencies who would be best placed to assess who hacked the DNC and gave the emails to WikiLeaks, they had low confidence in the allegation that it was Russia.
Low confidence.
That's the bottom line here. So even
low confidence. So what Matt Taibbi is saying is true. The NSA had low confidence. The private firm that Hillary Clinton and the DNC hired, CrowdStrike, they had high confidence, but the NSA had low confidence. I just think that's interesting.
Low confidence in the allegation that it was Russia. That's the bottom line here. So even if there was a conflation...
And we only learn about the NSA's low confidence from the recent disclosures from Tulsi Gabbard.
Best place to assess who hacked the DNC and gave the emails to WikiLeaks, they had low confidence in the allegation that it was Russia. That's the bottom line here. So even if there was a conflation made between vote machine hacking and DNC server hacking, it doesn't matter, because the intelligence on the email hacking said that we don't have any evidence that Russia did it. And that was kept from the public. That's a major scandal, because for years we were told this was the intelligence. This was the intelligence consensus. If you question this, you're a Russian propagandist. You're treasonous, as John Brennan said of Donald Trump when he questioned this. And that is the scandal here. The suppression of intelligence to manufacture a lie, in the same way that the U.S. government did in going to war in Iraq. And by the way, some of the same players in the Iraq WMD hoax are involved here, including James Clapper, who oversaw the production of the intelligence community assessment along with John Brennan. In his memoir,
all the same players. They're the same players. Clapper, Brennan, Comey, they were all in the Bush administration. They were all there for the Epstein stuff, for the Iraq stuff. They were all the same players, and Obama holds them over. The same people that lied to us about Iraq are the ones who manufactured this story.
Manufacture a lie in the same way that the U.S. government did in going to war in Iraq. And by the way, some of the same players in the Iraq WMD hoax are involved here, including James Clapper, who oversaw the production of the intelligence community assessment along with John Brennan. In his memoir, James Clapper writes about how he basically, in the rush to help the Bush administration make its case for invading Iraq, he went and found things that weren't there. That's almost a direct quote. I went and found things that weren't there. So what he was admitting to is manufacturing intelligence. So why are we surprised that he wouldn't? Why are we surprised that he did the same thing here? And why are we supposed to take these people's word on faith?
Absolutely,
especially given their record. And as a journalist,
because the 17 intelligence agencies. That's why they made up the 7. You don't believe the 17 intelligence agencies? Oh, come on, Matt, Aaron, you don't believe the 17 intelligence agencies? And that's why they made the lie up about the 17 intelligence agencies to give it credibility, because they had no evidence. They had no evidence at all.
We're supposed to take these people's word on faith, especially given their record. And as a journalist, I mean, look, I'm not a Trump guy. I'm not a fan, but it's not for unelected intelligence bureaucrats to decide, who gets to be in power.
That's exactly right.
What the foreign policy of the U.S. is. It's for the elected president.
That's exactly right.
And what we saw here was just a contemptuous response to an election in which the wrong guy in the eyes of powerful people won. And so they did work to undermine him. And no matter where you are on the political spectrum, you shouldn't support that.
The other thing about now learning that Russia hacked the DNC being a lie, or at least being totally unsupported, is
it's a lie.
It remains to this day one of the main things people downplaying the Tulsi news rely on to stand up their own conclusions that Russia was trying to help Trump. They say he hacked, Putin hacked the DNC. Putin released through WikiLeaks the dirt, at least some of it, that he had on Hillary. And therefore, how can you say he had any goal other than to help Donald Trump? That was not a helpful release for Hillary Clinton. And that's yet another reason why it is so significant that we're now learning that we don't actually have the goods on Russia being behind that DNC hack.
Nope, we do not have the goods on Russia being behind the hack at all. All right, almost finished here. I got a little more that I want to play. This is a interview that John Solomon was doing with Megyn Kelly, and they get into the hacking, and I want you to listen to what he says here. Very significant.
The DNC hack is much more problematic for several reasons. On James Comey's watch, the FBI never demanded to get the servers from the Democratic National Committee. Instead, they used its former cybersecurity chief and his company to evaluate the servers for the FBI and give them an analysis. And then that analysis was put out to the American public saying, based on what CrowdStrike, this vendor hired by the DNC, gave us, we believe there was a hack of the DNC servers. About 4 years ago, as Bill Barr was leaving, we were able to get the actual interviews that CrowdStrike's people did with the FBI. And in that interview, they said something very profound that has never been disputed since, which is the Russians gained access to the DNC servers. They did some probing. They did some escalations of credentials, meaning, all right, I hacked my way in. I could get myself to administrator level. But what CrowdStrike said that I think is so important for all of us to understand, that is a form of hacking. If you get to credential level, you've hacked yourself in. But what CrowdStrike said is they could never prove, there was no evidence of exfiltration, meaning that the Russians, after they got their permissions on the servers, they didn't pull the data off and get the emails and leak them out. Now, that is a very important qualification.
That's a very important.
There was some hacking. They got into the system, but CrowdStrike is very specific that we couldn't prove exfiltration occurred. Now,
so those are two different things, and you have to understand this, is that CrowdStrike says that Russia did hack into the DNC. And that's what Dmitry says here in this interview on CNN, that we found evidence that Russia hacked into the DNC, but he doesn't say that we found evidence that Russia downloaded these emails and these files and downloaded them back to Eastern Europe. And that's consistent with what Ray McGovern says and others who says that the download speeds, they're not consistent with files that were downloaded from the DNC back to Europe. They're more consistent with someone within the DNC downloading these files onto a thumb drive or a disk and transporting this information to WikiLeaks. That Russia did hack into the DNC. Russia, Israel, all these nations, they hack into networks all the time. And that's the nature of the business. We hack into their stuff. We have the Vault 7 tools that show that we're hacking into all kinds. Everybody hacks, but there's no evidence that Russia took anything from the DNC. And I think that that's very significant. All right, we're almost done. This is the last clip. This is a CNN report that they did during the Trump administration called The Russian Connection. And I want you to listen to what is said in this CNN report. Very interesting.
The nation's bitter adversary. They're coming after America. Dangerous and deceptive.
It was a reasonably realistic email.
He meant to say that it was illegitimate. He said it was legitimate. The rest is history.
Their weapons insidious and unsuspected.
They're looking to weaponize information.
Threatening American votes and striking at the
look at the way CNN sensationalizes this.
I do.
A spy story in cyberspace.
We don't believe that domain is owned by ActBlue, so we investigated.
That would lead right to Putin's doorstep.
If Mr. Trump gets his way, it'll be like Christmas in the Kremlin.
Okay, so that's how they start this off. All right, let's get to Clapper here.
Actually reach the highest levels of the U.S. government.
Can you say when you were first made aware that Russia or some country was attempting to infiltrate U.S. political organizations?
Sometime over the summer of 2015.
James Clapper,
2015,
Director of National Intelligence.
2015, the summer of 2015. This is a year before the release from WikiLeaks in the summer of 2016. This is a year before Seth Rich is murdered. 2015 is when the then Obama's Director of National Intelligence says that he first saw Russia meddling in the election. It's 2015. Very important, 2015.
Can you say when you were first made aware that Russia or some country was attempting to infiltrate U.S. political organizations?
Sometime over the summer of 2015.
James Clapper was then the Director of National Intelligence, the nation's senior-most intelligence official.
At that first warning, was it clear to you how serious it would become?
No, I don't think it was, because obviously the Russians have us as a primary, maybe the primary.
It wasn't. Listen, in 2015, when he saw the Russians hacking, that it wasn't that big of an issue to him, because Russians hack all the time. Just like I said, we hack them, they hack us. Just because they're hacking, this is the Director of National Intelligence, and he says that in 2015, when he saw the Russians hacking the DNC, it wasn't that big of a deal to him.
The nation's senior-most intelligence official.
At that first warning, was it clear to you how serious it would become?
No, I don't think it was.
It wasn't serious.
Obviously, the Russians have us as a primary, maybe the primary intelligence target anyway.
The first quiet warning came September 2015.
September 2015. This is the first time that the FBI and American intelligence, the first time that they noticed Russia hacking into the DNC servers, a year before the summer of 2016. 2015, at this time, Trump was, I guess he had only been a candidate for president for a couple of months at this time. He hadn't won the Republican primary. No one even believed he had a chance to win the Republican primary and to become the nominee. And in 2015, the summer of 2015, or in September of 2015, is the first time the FBI notices Russia hacking the DNC. Not that they were taking anything, but just like John Solomon says here, that they were just in there looking around. They were just in there. They hacked in, they were looking around, and the FBI notices them hacking the DNC and looking around in 2015. The September of 2015 is when they first noticed this. People?
No, I don't think it was, because obviously the Russians have us as a primary, maybe the primary intelligence target anyway.
The first quiet warning came September 2015, when a mid-level FBI agent notified the Democrats.
They have to tell you that he's mid-level. It was a mid-level FBI agent. I think that's funny. You're going to see why here in a moment. It's a mid-level FBI agent noticed that the Russians were hacking into the DNC looking around. 2015.
Anyway.
The first quiet warning came September 2015, when a mid-level FBI agent notified the Democratic National Committee that Russian hackers had compromised at least one DNC computer.
They left a phone message at the help desk of the DNC.
They left a phone message.
With the kind of seriousness
they left a phone message at the help desk. The low-level FBI agent. So it didn't get up to Comey and McCabe and these guys on the 8th floor. Or, that it was this low-level FBI agents. He noticed the Russians hacking into the DNC. So he calls the DNC and say, hey, the Russians are in your network. And he just leaves a message, a phone message, and the phone message is never relayed up to the chairman and the higher-ups there at the DNC, and nothing was done. This isn't crazy. If you believe this story, you're insane.
September 2015. When a mid-level FBI agent notified the Democratic National Committee that Russian hackers had compromised at least one DNC computer.
They left a phone message at the help desk of the DNC. They didn't treat it with the kind of seriousness I think that it deserved.
They left a phone message at the help desk at the DNC. This is insane. This is insane, people. This is insane. I just want you to see this, that in 2015, the FBI noticed that the Russians had hacked into the DNC server and they were looking around. Not that they were extracting anything, not that they were downloading anything. They had just hacked in and they were looking around. Same thing that John Solomon says here. And then this low-level FBI agent, he calls over to the DNC and leaves a phone message. The message never gets to the IT department there at the DNC. They never do anything to protect their network. And the FBI tracks the Russians looking around into the DNC for months between 2015 and 2016. Now, I'll show you this map because I want you to see that this is the J. Edgar Hoover building here. And this is the DNC here. It's a 7-minute drive. It's a 7-minute drive. The lower level FBI agent could have just, instead of leaving a phone message, could have just driven right over to the DNC and say, hey, the Russians are looking around on your server, but none of that was done. This is what they want you to believe. And then so the low level FBI agent monitors the Russians looking around into the DNC servers for months leading up to the leak and the dump in the summer of 2016. Who would believe this? This is insane. That this low-level FBI agent never reported to the higher-ups, up to McCabe or Comey or even Strzok, and say that, hey, we noticed that the Russians are hacking into one of our two major political parties, hacking into their system. The low-level FBI agent didn't do that. And he didn't warn the DNC and say, hey, the Russians are looking around in your network. He leaves a phone message, and the phone message is never relayed to the people there at the DNC is what they want you to believe. There's more to this. We'll get back into this in the next podcast, but there's no evidence that Russia hacked the DNC and took these emails and transmitted them to WikiLeaks. No evidence at all. No evidence at all. And many Americans still believe that because that's what they were told and that's what they were fed over and over again by the Democrats and our mainstream media. Hope you guys have a great Labor Day weekend. And I think that I'm going to take Labor Day off, and I'll be back next Friday. So again, you guys have a great Labor Day weekend, and I'll see you next Friday.